This is Fan Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Ryba, and we're going to talk to you about screen time strategies. And you are a screen time strategist, and we're talking about phone use best practices. But I want to welcome you to the Fan Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
Good, good. Thank you so much, Phantom, for having me on your show today. I'm so excited to chat about best practices.
Yeah, I think a lot of people probably find that they spend too much time on their phone, or they have,
Totally.
or they have like children or their partners, like everywhere they go is like, are we having a conversation or are you looking at your phone?
Yeah, yeah, all the time. It's just way too common these days.
Even in meetings, like in the corporate world, people like you got the director or somebody's giving a talk and everybody's on their phone. It's like, are you paying attention?
Yeah, yeah. It's really interesting how it's just taken over.
Well, it's basically, it's a mini computer in our hands, and so it has so
Mhm.
much power and so much connectivity with it. It's like Star Trek. The idea, like back, I'm a techie, but like sci-fi. The idea of that communicator back in the day on the original Star Trek, people say, "Oh, that's like that can't happen," and it's
Right.
like
And now it
so funny.
has,
It's
and so much
exactly what
more.
that was, even
Yeah,
more. But
totally.
so one of the things I ask every guest before we get to the heart of your story is like what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Let's see. In terms of motivators, I love to learn, I love to create, and I love to help others. And so authorship, especially in nonfiction, really suits me in that way. This is a topic that's been a personal interest of mine, but then when I started to realize how much other people could also benefit from my knowledge, the fact that it could be of service to other people made it even more interesting um, goal for me.
So is so as an author, how long have you been an author and what made you want to be an author?
Yeah, great question. I've not been an author for long. This is my first book. I
Oh,
used to
wow.
be a high school math teacher. And then I had my first child during COVID and I stopped teaching, although that wasn't the plan. But it was during COVID and I was teaching at a 5 borough school in New York City. And there was so much uncertainty during that time. So I was home with kids for a little bit, but I was always looking for something intellectually stimulating to do in tandem with being home. And again, this is just our relationship with technology and the downsides of technology has been something that I've been interested in the entire time technology has existed, like my whole life. And when I started to see how technology was affecting, and especially the phone was affecting my kids, my husband, my relationships, I just got curious about it and I felt
Mhm.
like this is solvable. There are some things in life that are not solvable, but this is one of those things that I felt like we can hack this. So let me work on this a little bit. And so first I was going to just, figure out some frameworks for me, my friends, but then I kept talking to people that said, "Oh my god, the phone, like I don't know what to do about it." And I said, "Oh, I'm working on this." And so again, the service aspect, when I realized that it's something that could help others, I thought I might as well turn this into a book if I'm going to do all this work. So that's sort of where it came from, and kind of as soon as I found it, it feels like such a fit, and I know I'll be here for a long time in authorship.
That's interesting because I'm a child of the '70s. I'm in my late '50s, almost '60, and back in our day, we didn't have this type of phone. We
Hmm.
didn't have the internet. We didn't have computers. If you wanted to get a book, you had to go to the library. You
Totally.
had 4 TV channels. So we had more of an attention span, and I've seen this is part of the thing I've noticed as an artist
Hmm.
is people don't have the patience to actually read an entire book, right? They don't a lot of times they don't wanna read, like a 200,000 pa word book. It's more of like a 60,000, 70,000. Like, in terms of music, we used to
Hmm.
listen to songs that were 4 minutes, 3 minutes long. Now they want songs that are 2.5 minutes long. What our postings are like 15 seconds, 30 seconds. So that to me is a symptom of an issue because like how much do you really retain when you're only glancing and doing the cliff notes on everything?
Oh, 100%. I mean, this is such an interesting, result of this phone use. I mean, there is a statistic about office workers and how long that they would be working on a task. And just a few years ago, it was like every 3 minutes they would switch tasks, and now it's every 45 seconds. So even an adult is task switching every 45 seconds when they're at their job that they're being paid to do. And in terms of attention span and song length, I totally agree. I still do some tutoring, and one of my high school students, she works with first graders, and they were doing an icebreaker, and they were asked to say their favorite songs. And these first graders, these 6, 7-year-olds, they were quoting TikTok songs, not real songs, because they
Hmm.
didn't even know real songs because they just get their music from TikTok. And, when you think about the fact that people used to sit through, and some people still do, but more people used to sit through symphonies that were an hour long. And
Yeah.
now people need to check their phones when they're at concerts, like Taylor Swift concerts, and the songs are only 3 minutes long. It's a little crushing, I
But I
mean,
think,
when you
yeah,
think
it's
about
like,
how great the human mind is and what it could be doing, and yet like we can't even think
yeah,
about
I
things
think,
for that long. It's
yeah, it's something like even when the musicians are practicing, like if we go to rehearsals and studios, we have rules like you have to turn off the phone.
mm,
Like you can't have the phone in your rehearsal because then you're not gonna pay attention when you're in the song, right?
that
You're
makes sense.
supposed to be working on the song. It's like even when like I'm in software design and we kinda get roles, it's like, hey, like sometimes we have to really do a lot of critical thinking and analysis, and we can't just take like 30 seconds. Like we have to look at it pretty deep, kind of like the way a lawyer looks at something deep.
Mhm.
And even lawyers, I heard some lawyers getting dinged for using like AI. And the case
Yeah.
and they got dinged because they actually didn't do the due diligence, and they let the AI give them some information. It was wrong.
Yeah, there was a
So,
case where lawyers used AI to find cases, and the dangerous thing about AI is that if it doesn't know an answer, it will make up an answer.
yeah,
So
hallucination.
AI made up some cases which the lawyers presented at court, and the judge said these cases don't exist. Yeah, that was a funny one. It's interesting that you say that about rehearsals, because I'm a classically trained violinist and I used to play violin, but I stopped maybe 10 years ago. And so back when I used to play, I mean, iPhones and stuff weren't a thing. So I had like a metronome. I imagine people now use apps on their phone for metronomes, and even then, honestly, it's sometimes hard to focus on practicing. And I didn't even have the distraction that is the
Distractions,
smartphone
yeah.
today. So I
Yeah, we
can't
even tell
imagine how
people to
difficult
turn
that would
off
be.
their wearables,
Yeah, no, that
because,
makes
like,
sense. They're very
because you
distracting.
yeah, you can't be getting alerts and having a ding, like,
Mhm,
when you're trying to do something. It's like but it to me, it's like, a lot of times people don't even dive into the depth of an artist's work. Like,
mhm,
in terms of, like, if you can't read a 200,000 word book, right? If you can't read one of the class like Moby Dick, people have a hard time getting into something like that, or reading the Iliad or the Odyssey. And, yeah, that's standard kind of practice if you're gonna be in a major, right, in a liberal arts
mhm,
major.
mhm.
And I think it's really doing a disservice to you as a student
Oh,
if you're
totally.
if you're not really capturing all that information, you're just trying to scrape the bare minimum,
Mhm,
to get the synopsis and just I just think that to me is very worrying that people aren't taking the time it takes because it takes like 10,000 hours to get to be anything, you know.
mhm.
And we can understand an athlete will focus and get that 3-point shot, and people will say, "Oh, I'll still do that work." But a musician, I mean, we have to put that much work to learn our instrument.
Totally.
Painter have to get to learn their craft. They got to put
Mhm.
the time in. If you're so distracted, how are you gonna ever really commit to anything?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that about the ability to just read longer, longer amounts, because that reminds me of when I used to teach high school math. The last year that I taught, I was teaching AP statistics, which I taught every year. And every year after the AP exam, I would read a book with my AP class of seniors because we're done with the exam. And so now we have some time till the end of the year. And I would assign 40 or 50 pages of reading a night. And I did this every year after the AP exam. But my last year of teaching, it was COVID, so it was 2020. I had great rapport with my students. I just want to put that out there. They did love me, but
Mhm.
they complained to the AP and they said, she's giving way too much reading. Like, we can't read 40 pages a night. And I was like, is
Really?
this a joke? Like, are you serious? And so they complained to her. And so she told me I can't assign it. And then I can't. And so even as a teacher, I'm not even allowed to, and this is supposed to be a college level class for seniors. These
Yeah.
are 18-year-old kids.
But when you get to
Um,
college, I mean, I went to Bode, my brother went to Harvard
mhm.
and Brown. The amount of reading we had to do, like when I went to
Oh,
school in
yeah.
86, it's
Mhm.
more than that.
Oh,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, I
So you're kinda short, it's really not a good, I don't know who's thinking that that's too much, because that's
right.
like
Yeah.
that's it's like if you're gonna go to college and go to the Ivy League or the small co like a Amherst or a
Mhm,
Colby or
mhm,
Bates or something like
mhm.
Smith, like, you're gonna have to do that level to be able to maintain with the other people who have that rigor.
Exactly, exactly. And so, part of this comes back to the phone and how is phone use detracting from our ability to focus. And I think, the first step is awareness and realizing how it's affecting us is a great first step that a lot of people haven't taken. So awareness is a great place to start.
So best practices, I mean, like, we have rules, like I said, people say, "Turn it off," or
Hmm.
Don't bring it, keep it in the bag, put it in the
Hmm.
locker,
Hmm.
don't use it," right? But
Hmm.
what are other types of things that you recommend?
Yeah. So, I mean, first, I'll just touch on the one you were already talking about, which I call proximity. It's just that if something's close by, you're going to be tempted to use it, whether it's your favorite snack or whether it's your phone, So, taking into consideration when you want to be using it and when you're not, and then placing your phone accordingly matters. So, my phone for this podcast is not in my room. My Apple Watch, I took it off because I don't want it dinging while we're talking. And so that takes intentionality, and so a lot of people might think, oh, that's too much work. I have to be thinking every single step of my day of when I want to be with my phone and when I don't. But it's actually not true because you can simplify things by thinking about what we call techno philosophies. So,
Mm,
techno philosophies are your philosophies on technology. So, everyone already has some people have more than others. So, a techno philosophy might be I don't use my phone when I'm at a restaurant with people. A techno philosophy might be I don't scroll while someone's talking to me. I don't text while driving. Some techno philosophies should be, right? But I see people texting while driving all the
yeah,
time, like while
yeah,
turning. But anyway, some techno philosophies are more set in stone. So for safety, for example, it should be set in stone. I don't text while driving. Some techno philosophies might be a little bit looser. So for me, I try not to be on my phone as much as possible while I'm with my kids. But I'm not going to say I definitely will never, ever, ever be on my phone when I'm with my kids because that's not practical. There is a possibility that I'd get an important phone call or whatever.
mhm,
So anyway, techno philosophies are really useful because once you take the time to think about when do I think my phone use when do I think I want to use my phone versus not, then you can start to use these values to guide your choices and it makes things easier and more automated. So proximity is a good one. Another thing is just thinking about how you start your day. So if I could only choose one thing to tell everyone that's listening to this podcast, it would be your phone should not sleep in your bedroom with you. Okay. It should be in the kitchen, the bathroom, wherever. And even that, I say kitchen, bathroom, whatever, but you might want to be intentional about where you place it because if you go brush your teeth first thing in the morning and your phone is in the bathroom, that's when you're going to pick your phone up. If you want to delay your first interaction with your phone in the day, then maybe it should be somewhere else in the house. Um, so that's one thing to take into consideration because if your phone is on your bedside table, it is so hard not to pick it up first thing in the morning.
yeah, that kinda goes
Yeah.
yeah, that kinda goes toward where a lot of people are saying that they're having trouble sleeping because they got their phone, like, right on their
Mhm.
bedstand or right on their bed, and it's, like, interrupting their sleep all night, dinging them.
Yes. And studies have shown that even if someone is not actively on their phone, just having their phone on their bedside table reduces the quality of their sleep because they know that they might be getting messages and it makes them want to check it. Which
So they
is,
just proximity again, they're gonna go check
yeah,
it even if they didn't get dinged.
yeah. So I think not having your phone in your bedroom with you is so important. And then just thinking about what are other spaces that I want to be free from my phone, and even just the framing. Think like instead of thinking I can't have my phone or I shouldn't have my phone, because we as humans, we love to rebel when we're not allowed to do something, thinking
Yeah.
I'm going to let myself be free of my phone when I am with my friends or when I am working on a project that I'm passionate about or when I'm sleeping or watching TV, um, is a important reframe.
Also, like, you think about it, like, people and I don't know, it seems like it happens all the time. As I have a 25-year-old daughter, and she's, like, she's got a video game on, like a PS5 on, phone on, like, an iPad on, you know? She's got, like, 3, 4 devices all on. It's like and
Yeah.
she's watching a TV show on one,
Hmm.
looking at TikTok on another, and later gets it's like, "W are you doing all those things?" It's like so
Yeah.
so it's like, what are you it's like, so how could you and I guess she's managing it, but there's so many things going on, it's like, don't you wanna focus on, like, one thing?
Right. And I mean, I think the short answer is no, she doesn't, It even when you're doing something enjoyable like watching a movie, sometimes there are more boring parts, and by having lots of screens open, we're letting ourselves not have to be patient or not, experience that discomfort, which is something that takes some intention. And I guess that goes back to thinking about, how do I want to approach this? When I watch a movie, is it important to me that I'm focusing just on that? To me, the answer is yes. I think that long form content is something that, at this point, it's funny, but I almost feel like people deserve praise if they can sit through a whole movie without taking out their phone. But that's kind of the
Yeah.
reality that we're at. Um,
It's almost like the respect for the director and the writer and the actor in that if you don't get drawn into it, like, like I said, I'm a child of the '70s, so I didn't have those distractions. So when
mhm,
I watched a movie, I would wanna watch it all the way through, and I still have that kind of mindset. I mean, I listen to albums.
mhm,
We have in this day and age, most people listen to playlists.
mhm,
Hey, and I'll listen to rock operas. I'll listen to things that are jazz, like fusion jazz, bebop jazz. This stuff that people might not get into because their pieces are longer than 2 minutes. They're 5, 6,
mhm.
7, 8 minutes.
Right,
Um, so
right.
if people don't have the patience to actually get drawn in, right? And you only want to see the highlights or the action scene or the point.
Mhm,
Like, well, the buildup is a lot of the story.
mhm,
The
mhm.
silence is the space between notes. That's a lot of the
Totally.
story, and if you don't understand that, it's like you're losing a lot of the art, the
Mhm,
impact of the art.
mhm. And it's so much more satisfying and fulfilling when you go that way. So that makes me think a little bit about dopamine and why it's important not to start the day with scrolling. With dopamine, order matters in terms of what activity you engage in before another, as well as time of day. So we have a finite amount of dopamine every day. Like we wake up with a finite amount of dopamine. And if you wake up in the morning and just scroll for an hour, you have used up all your dopamine on fast dopamine activity. Then when you go sit down and try to watch a movie, it's almost impossible to watch it because you just behavior reinforced fast dopamine, fast, fast, fast. And you're like, the credits? Like, what is this? Right. The interesting thing is if you switch the order and you start, so I guess you're on vacation or something because you're scrolling and watching TV all day in this example. But anyway, let's say you wake up and you start your day with TV instead of the movie, instead of scrolling. You haven't used up all your dopamine yet. And you're engaging in this slower form dopamine activity first. And so when the movie gets to the climax or whatever, you're going to actually be able to enjoy that. And then you haven't even used up all your dopamine. So if you still want to scroll afterwards, you can, and you're going to get some satisfaction or enjoyment out of that. Um, so knowing this, I think, is really helpful because, especially, creatives, software engineers, and anyone that needs to work on tasks that are slower and require focus um, and then you get satisfaction after putting in the hours of work and finishing the product, you have to do that first. And I mean, I definitely, even though I know that, I still sometimes will mess up and like I know I have to write a chapter one day and I'm like, oh, I sit down and I scroll a little bit and now I'm like, what have I done? Because it's going to be even harder to write,
Harder to yeah,
compared to, yeah.
that's
But I
interesting.
I do think that knowledge has helped me, and so that's something that's information that I try to get out there when possible. I'm not saying don't scroll, never scroll. but
Mhm.
order does matter. Put it off for as long as possible in your day. That can also really make a big difference to how you approach other activities, because dopamine is a behavior reinforcer. So when you do the other activities and then you feel great afterwards, then that encourages you to continue that behavior. Whereas if you scroll first, you get all your dopamine from scrolling, you're telling yourself, scroll, 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 it's great. And then you engage in these slower dopamine activity afterwards when you're out of dopamine, and then your body gets no dopamine, your brain gets no dopamine. So your brain says, don't do that. That was no fun. I got nothing out of that.
Mhm.
So
That's interesting because a lot of times, what I found is there's a diminishing return, like part of being a software developer is a lot of times we would sit and go for hours trying to
mhm,
solve the problem.
mhm.
And what we found is the diminishing returns is if you had somebody sitting 6 hours straight and they're trying to solve some technical, you know, algorithm.
Mhm.
The mission you would think, well, I spent 6 hours sitting in the queue trying to solve it. But actually, if you got up and walked away and actually went for a walk or actually, got to get a 50,000-foot view of it instead of being so close to it, you tend to get the answers or those solutions tend to come easier if you walk away from it rather than spending 6 hours straight on it.
Definitely. Yeah, that's also related to energy management, which I think is really important. We aren't meant to sit for 6 hours with a problem. Most people only have 3 to 5 hours in a day of like peak performance. And if we expect to top that, we're just setting ourselves up for failure. And then when we feel like, oh, I'm so tired, I'm so drained, we pull out the phone and we start scrolling. Right. And so being really in tune with what your body and mind is capable of, and then playing with that instead of against it is so important. Like a really common one is like the 2 p.m. slump, right? People love to try to like power through the slump. Oh, I got my 2 p.m. coffee and like whatever. Or, I mean, you can still have your coffee, but you could say, okay, 2 to 3 p.m. every day, like no matter what, I seem tired at this time. Maybe that's just what my body does. So if that's the case, pick a low energy activity for that time. Maybe 2 to 3 p.m. is when you reply to emails. You know what I mean? You don't have to be at the top of your game for
Yeah.
that. So, really, just like the more you know yourself, the more you can master your phone problems, just being in tune. Um, and the ironic thing is that the phone use really counteracts that, because when you're on your phone, you're not present, you're not in your body, you're in the virtual world instead. So you don't even notice if you're thirsty or hungry, and then all of a sudden you zap out of it and you're like, oh, I'm exhausted, I'm so tired, it's 2 a.m. So being intentional before you engage in the phone use is again really important.
Also, you have to look at, like, how productive is, like, doom scrolling.
Totally.
Because, like, if you're to me, I'm a creative. I know a lot of other creatives, and the act of doing the creativity, right, you can get into kind of a zone. If I
Hmm.
sit at the
Flow.
piano, I might get into this kind of flow state, and I intended to only play, like, a half hour. I end up playing, like, 2 hours and putting it down.
Hmm.
But it's all kinda great because it's like that's where this flow state, you allow your subconscious stuff comes out, and you're willing to kinda give yourself the permission structure to let that happen. And I think in a world today, a lot of people, like, have this perfection trap or a
Mm.
comparison trap. They're always trying to match somebody else, trying to keep up with the Joneses or clone
Mhm.
something that already exists and not feeling that their authentic, vulnerable, original content is worth anything.
Mhm.
Kinda because the phone has triggered us and say, "Oh, unless I got 1,000 likes or 10,000 likes or all these hearts, it's not valuable."
Mhm. Yeah, that's really interesting. It's so true. I think the comparison trap is also again something that we have to be really mindful of. It can be so easy to be sucked into it, and people talk about how we should be mindful that it's a highlight reel, right? If we're looking at someone's social media, but I think we have to go a step further than that, because what does it mean that you're looking at someone's highlight reel? It means that you're engaging in something called upwards comparison, right? Where you are comparing something where they are better than or have more than or whatever. And upwards comparison is terrible for our self esteem. Um, and social media use creates this unnatural amount of upwards comparison versus downwards comparison. Before social media, it was more balanced. Sometimes you'd notice, oh, like that person has a better X than me. And then you'll notice, oh, I have a better Y than someone else. It was more balanced. But
Yeah,
because
now
of
it's
social
totally
media, we're
opposite.
only seeing this amazing vacation, that amazing meal, that amazing whatever. And you're looking down at yourself in your sweatpants and your microwave meal. And you're like, what is my life? So I don't know if knowing that it's a highlight reel is enough. I think that it needs to be limited because it's just not that useful or helpful.
Also, for like, if you think about younger people that are
Mhm,
basically in their developmental stage, and you're into it's kind of like I don't know, it's like a cyberbullying, maybe a subconscious cyberbullying, because you're
mhm,
getting inundated with all these sculpted reels
mhm,
of they're
mhm.
always these are like the people are taking a lot of time to give you the best image of themselves, the best
Yeah.
painted picture, the best mask that they have. It's not real. A lot of it could
Mhm.
be manipulated by the tech. You can
Totally.
have all these different enhancements, and is that really them? You don't know
Mhm,
that that's really them. You don't know everything that somebody does. It doesn't go from a 0 to 100. Everybody that gets successful has all these points that you might not want to see because it's not, does that's not going to get you a 10,000 views to see the
right.
hard parts. Only the success parts get you the, so you're not seeing the full story. So that's not the best thing to be, giving young people who need to understand is like there's some rigor and discipline. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to learn from mistakes. But if you
Yeah, there's a
don't show
whole
that,
path that's
if you don't,
messy
yeah,
that
you don't
gets you to
show
that
that.
final. Mhm.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, no, that's definitely really tricky. I mean, my focus isn't on children for this book, but I have kids of my own and it is something that I think about. I think I mean, even when I taught high schoolers, it was really interesting to see. And I mean, um, people are so used to seeing, for example, their faces in Snapchat filters and Instagram filters that they don't even like their real face. They prefer the filtered face, which like it makes sense because with the filtered face, the pimples are gone and whatever, but it's hard when that becomes what they're used to, but then if everyone else is doing it, it's tricky. And so again, I guess that's where we need to set boundaries and
yeah, because then the
parents also
reality,
have a role to play there.
because when you actually meet somebody in real life, they're not their filter.
Right.
And then you
Right.
get people who go, in the dating apps, and because they get disappointed, they just go, "I'm just gonna scroll to the next person in real life."
Yeah.
So, because real life is never gonna match what you're seeing on the screen.
Yes.
And so then
Yes.
you're
It's
never
not so
gonna be
curated.
satisfied, so you're setting yourself up to be always disappointed
Right.
and not willing to kinda, are you living in the screen or are you living in the world?
Yes. And I think you can only live in one. So that's the tricky thing. Yeah.
So have you got some, like, I guess that this kind of point I'm going into, like the screen
Mhm.
world versus the real world. And the people get so caught up in the screen world that they don't know how to actually navigate the real world.
That's a great question. I mean, I think a a result of COVID, the COVID really kind of snowballed that because we were so isolated and we literally only could communicate virtually. And so post COVID, a lot of people said they felt like it was kind of harder to make eye contact with people and make small talk because they just weren't used to it. And now that has seemed to have continued a little bit. We've recovered a bit socially as a human race, but I feel like we haven't gotten back to our pre-COVID selves, or a lot of people haven't. Because even in an elevator or in a line, people don't have to look at other people anymore. They just look at their phone. And then when
Yeah.
they're in a situation where they have to, they feel lost and they say, what do I do with my hands? I'm usually holding a phone. Um, and so I mean, I think that's really challenging. And I think that it's a choice that people have to make for themselves. So if you are in a situation where you feel like it's tricky because you find that if you're at a party and you're not talking to anyone, you want to pull out your phone, or you're waiting in line and you see other people pulling out their phones, so you want to pull out your phone. You have a choice, right? You can continue to practice not being able to socialize with other people, or you can do the hard, messy thing and say, you know what, it might be awkward. I might make a fool of myself, but I'm going to try it. And with practice, I'm going to get better. Um, so that's definitely something that, um, I think the ball is in your court, whoever
Yeah.
it is, it's on the individual. And so that's again why I'm so passionate about getting my message out there, because I think a lot of people don't realize how much of this is actually in their own control, which is actually a great thing. If it's in
Yeah.
your own control, that means that you can decide what's my ideal phone use and then actually go for that and figure out how to get there. I think, of course, there are some ways that society does kind of collude to create we are in a tech heavy world, but
Yeah.
it maybe doesn't need to affect you as much as you think it does, and you do have choices,
Yeah,
and
well,
that's
this
one
like
of them.
I think the problem is like the technology has given us potential habits that are counterintuitive to human
Hmm.
experience. Like typically before the tech, human beings use eye contact and nonverbal communication. It's going back toward, thousands of years. When we get these tech crutches or these habits and we get locked into it, and we're in the information age, AI, robotic automation age, and that skill that we used to have, it's kind of like, we used to know in the forest what was good and what was bad.
Hmm.
Then we said, well, we'll let science take care of that. We'll let biological, pharmaceuticals take care of that. So we lost that. So we lose things like the tech. Eventually, we lose certain innate capabilities,
Hmm.
and that to me is like a foundational capability of communication. And it has like I was a sociology major. There's like there are microcosm and macrocosm effects to this. At a
Yes.
microcosm, you have that situation where a spouse and a husband or a partner, people in a family aren't communicating, which
Hmm.
is the family structure. They need to communicate.
Hmm.
If that's stopping that microcosm communication, it cascades to the macrocosm where you get in social groups and you're not communicating. Well,
Hmm.
communication problems cause instability, cause, you know, chaos. It causes like things to happen that it just a cascading bad effect of
Hmm.
this technology crutch. So
Hmm.
it is an individual responsibility, but there are macrocosm effects that maybe make it a social responsibility as well.
Definitely. It's really interesting. I mean, when you talk about microcosms, we can think about like the family and the larger structures, but another interesting way to think about it is the different microcosms that exist online versus in real life, and which one people tend to prioritize. So um someone who is, a top gamer or influencer, or in some way at sort of the top of their little microcosm in a virtual setting, might make sacrifices in their real world microcosm or macrocosm in order to excel in the virtual world,
In the screen
and
world, yeah,
so
virtual world.
yeah, and so that's a trade-off. Maybe let's say you're on a trip with your girlfriends that you haven't seen you're on like a reunion trip with your girlfriends, and you're in this beautiful place, and you could either spend your time fully present with them or say, wait, this is a great place for me to make a lot of content for my Instagram, and I'm a really like hot influencer, so I'm
More
going
so,
to do
yeah.
that. It's a trade-off, right? Which one do you want to do? And you one of the things is going to suffer, right? Like, you either have lost, it's the opportunity cost of like these beautiful sunset photos that could have like gotten you lots more followers, or you're not being present with these friends that you've known for decades. So I think understanding the trade-offs and thinking
Yeah, it
about
is,
what is
yeah.
important to me is really
But it's like
important.
it's so there's sometimes the softer things, like, we're living in a world where we have the immediate kinda, um, data impact, data visualization. I can have an immediate metric. I can measure my followers, my likes, my monetary thing. And then
Yes.
there's the softer things like the heart, the soul, and the spirit. Well, it's hard to
Mhm.
put that on the data visualization,
Yes.
but eventually that's going to probably catch up to you
Hmm.
because you might crash and then you have to go to counseling because you crashed and
Hmm.
you don't understand why you crashed.
Yes. And it does take confidence to be able to lean into those softer metrics. I think it's hard. You have to trust yourself. It takes self-trust also. Like I love using my Apple Watch to count my steps and seeing, how hard my workout was. And I think there was a time where I would never want to do a workout without my Apple Watch. Like it doesn't even count if I didn't do it on my Apple Watch, but I've been
Mhm.
practicing intentionally, not wearing it for days or whatever, and I really don't use it that much anymore. And instead I try to go by how I feel, how hard was that workout. But it's easier to have the metrics just laid
Yeah,
out for you,
and there are some I
um
mean, yeah, I mean, I'm a type 2 diabetic, and my Apple
mhm,
Watch hook up to my Dexcom, I can immediately know my A1C. Now that's a life-saving tech for a
yes.
diabetic. So
Hmm.
that is a cool use of tech to monitor somebody that has a condition to keep them from going
Hmm.
in the red zone.
Hmm.
So that makes sense, right?
Yes.
But
That's
but
very different from me saying, "Oh, I burned 240 calories versus 250 calories," and who even knows how accurate that is.
yeah,
Yeah, so I think being really aware of when it is useful technology and when it is distracting technology is so important because we're overloaded with information right now and we don't need it all.
yeah,
And
if
that's the thing that people need to realize. You don't need all the information. So think about what you do need and get that and then just like live your life.
yeah, if there's a prioritization to, like, your blood glucose, your blood pressure, certain things that are critical, vital sign level stuff. Like if you've had
Mhm.
arrhythmia or something gonna tell you that you're having a heart problem. You don't want your TikTok feed overriding that.
Right.
You so if people could start to prioritize or understand, and maybe even, looking at what you're sending through on your alerts
Mhm.
and starting to say, "Do I really need an alert
Mhm.
that's not really that critical?" Right?
Mhm.
So let the alerts from the Dexcom come through or from the whatever glucose monitor or it's arrhythmia or something if you're a patient or somebody that makes a lot of sense. But the other stuff is like, do you really need that? You could set a
Right.
time. Is that scheduling? I was going to ask about scheduling.
Yeah,
Part
yeah.
of what
I mean,
you
first I
do in
just
your book is like scheduling.
yeah, I just wanted to also say though, in terms of the glucose monitoring versus the TikTok notifications, I just want to recognize for any listeners though that it is so hard, because we are social beings. We care. We want to know how people have interacted with their content. So I want to put that out there. But yes, scheduling notifications, let's talk about that. So I first, I think it's really important to turn off any notifications you don't need. So almost all apps come with notifications. I was just thinking today that there's an app which notifications I need to delete. I downloaded this meditation app because I got like a free 1 year trial. And every day at 8 a.m. and 10 p.m., it gives me notification to meditate. And every single time it comes on, I'm like, I should turn that notification off. So a lot of apps just like come with automatic notifications, right? So as much as possible, say no, I don't want the notification when you download the app. And then go through every now and then, or if you notice something that keeps bothering you, like my meditation app, turn it off. Second, after you've turned off the notifications that you literally will never ever need, it's really important and useful to customize your focus settings. So iPhones come with do not disturb, Android comes with something called something similar. Um, there's a few default settings now that you can customize. So there's do not disturb, there's sleep, but you can create. I have a
Hmm,
work setting. I have a babysitter setting. So sometimes if I'm away from my kids, the only person I want notifications from is my babysitter. Otherwise, I don't care, As long
mhm.
as like my kids are not in danger, I don't care and I don't want any notifications. So you can customize those and there's a real beauty to that because a lot of people say, "Oh, I could never use do not disturb because I might miss important calls." Well, guess what? You can use do not disturb and say block everything except phone calls. And
Yeah.
so knowing what you need and then using do not disturb is really useful. And then in terms of responding to texts, emails, DMs, I really believe in batching. So think about how often you need to reply to people and then try to hold yourself to clearing out your inbox once a day or responding to
Um,
your DMs once a day or maybe it needs to be twice a day. I don't know, maybe your work is in social media and you need to be on there more frequently. But You decide. That's the most important thing with phone use is when do I want to respond to messages? It's not that I'm doing something, ping, oh, I got this message. I need to
Yeah, it's
read it and
like you
respond
want to be
right now.
responsive. It's like there's sometimes the alerts are making people feel like they have a job to do,
Yes.
and
And
they
they're
have to do
designed
it
that
right
way.
then.
Yes, we have a Pavlovian response to it. There's a reason that notifications are red because humans are drawn to the color red. Um, but so, reducing the notifications and deciding on your own terms when you're going to respond
Mhm.
to things is really useful. And then if you're wondering, well, then people are going to get mad at me or people are going to wonder what's going on. You have two options. One, you can answer once a day and they will get the message because humans are smart and they'll realize, oh, Ruby tends to not respond instantaneously to me. I guess that's just how she is. Or if you feel like you need to, you could tell them, you could say, hey, I'm trying to form better digital wellness habits and I've decided that I respond to my texts once a day. Um, but you don't owe anyone an instant response.
Yeah. I think that's real important because, like, hey, if you're at your job, your boss, if you're on the clock, they wanna be able to get to you. That's kinda like the
Yes.
clock.
Yes.
And the kind of work I do is kinda like where if they wanna do it, they wanna do it. I'm in, like, a startup, so it's got a very dynamic kind of flow, so
Mhm.
that yeah, that's gonna get the top priority
Right, you're
when
on
I'm on.
Slack from, like, 9 a.m. to 5 or whatever it
Yeah.
is, yeah.
But when
That
I'm
makes sense.
outside of that, but you like if you're in your side gig, like say the podcast, like
Mhm,
I got people who want to be guests, and I get
mhm,
pinged anytime somebody
mhm.
wants to be a guest. I'm doing what you're saying. I'm only going at that, looking at that once a day,
Amazing.
and just taking care of all the people who want to be guests at that time, and say, hey, I'm going to do that for like an hour at this time.
Mhm,
But I'm not going to go and get drawn into that in other times. I decided I'm gonna put it here, but that's kind of managing time, and some people have a hard
mhm,
time with time management, so that might be
mhm.
another problem.
Yeah, no, that's very smart. And I guess the other thing to take into consideration is that these rules and structures will change, you know? So, maybe as your podcast career grows and you decide I'm going to do it full time, then maybe you'd start responding to your messages twice a day or three times a day. I don't know. And sometimes when something is new, it's hard not to. So I have recently started my podcast book tour. And so when I start sending out messages, I might check a few times a day. Ooh, did the person respond to me yet? Because I'm curious and I want to know, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
okay. And to try not to beat yourself up over that. So it's tricky, but I think at least having the aspirational framework of I'm going to do this once a day. And for some things, you'll be able to hold yourself immediately to it. And for
Yeah.
some things, there are times in your life where you'll be more lenient with yourself. Because if you expect perfection, then
Well,
you're just setting
perfection, that's
yourself
the
up for
problem.
fail.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
always the perfection trap is like if you fall off the wagon of that trap, then you think you beat yourself up. But the
Hmm.
tendency well, you gotta learn is like if you make a mistake, it's not the end. Like if
Hmm.
when you're a musician, you're learning the instrument. There's lots of people around you might be learning. You stayed with it because you understood that, like, you're not gonna get it day 1. Some
Yes.
people, like, expectation learn a guitar, if they didn't get it within the first month, 2 months, then boom, it stays in the garage and never pick it up again.
Yeah.
Other people have, like, a tolerance, like, level for you to stay in with something. It's kinda like you don't always have to be perfect, right? You
Hmm.
have to
Hmm.
kind of be within the range of what you expect, but that like, the perfection thing is always a problem, it keeps
Totally.
people from getting
That
into.
that reminds me of a conversation that I had, with a coaching client where we were talking about scrolling, and, I told him, "Just so you know, just because you scrolled for longer than you wanted to at some point in the day, that doesn't mean that that day is just a total failure?" And it sounds like common sense, but to him, he thought, that's an interesting way to put it because I kind of thought, okay, well, I just scrolled for half an hour. So today is just like, whatever. I'm just going to go lie down in bed and scroll for a few hours. But once he started to implement, it's okay if I scrolled for 30 minutes. That's done, but I still have the whole rest of my day for me. That does just because I scrolled for those 30 minutes doesn't mean that I have to ruin the rest of my day.
Yeah.
That really helped him a lot. And I think it's something that we have to remember.
You can have little wins, you're not gonna get the whole thing done, you're like, you
Yes.
a lot of people, like, if you can't get from A to Z right away, then
Hmm.
they drop the whole thing, or you
Right.
say, like, you dump it and you say, "Well, I can't do it." It's just a matter of, perfectionism is kind of a trap of the modern age because I think it goes back to seeing all these perfect images and all
Yes.
these
Yes.
perfect things is making people down on themselves.
Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, they have to, like, understand that what you're being shown is not exactly the truth.
Mhm. And even with digital wellness and, biohacking and all these things, you see these Instagram videos of this is how I start my day. I wake up at 5 a.m. and I have my coconut oil and then I do a cold plunge and this and that. And then at like 2 p.m. I go on my phone for the first time. Like I guarantee you that whoever made that video, like first of all, they don't do that every single day. And when people see that sort of content and then they see the stark difference between that and their reality, it makes them feel like there's no hope. But first of all, like I call BS. I think that that video is fake. But even if it was real, there is a spectrum, and we don't have to be at the bottom or the top. We just need
Mhm.
to be better than we were yesterday, or maybe not. Some days we dip.
Yeah,
You're
and then
tired. You had a bad day. You had a long day. Like whatever.
so some people are like, you got a bell curve, and then you have people who are neurodivergent, you have people who are creative. There are
Totally.
tons of creative people that are not in the bell curve. They're on the
Mhm.
edges of the bell curve.
Yes.
And their creativity is because they're not in that middle path,
Mhm.
and so a lot of times people are down on themselves and they actually have a really good talent.
Mhm.
And you're
That's a great
not gonna
point.
be always like everybody else. And so the individualism, we're always talking about individualism, but then we spend time trying to be like everybody.
Yeah,
Or trying to be
yeah.
like the optimum everybody.
Mhm.
And it's like you have to have a permission structure for your vulnerability.
Mhm.
And that's the nature of art is that we know our vulnerability is our secret sauce.
Right, right.
Is what and
Totally.
so we kinda lean into it and we have to have kind of a little bit of an armor on the haters because when you lean into that, people are gonna hit you with
Mhm.
like, oh, they don't like it, or they're gonna, you know, ding you for it. But that is kind of where the art happens, is in that kind of zone, and people may not realize it's like it's not in the perfection zone that
Right.
that is happening. It's in this kind of it's kind of different. And
Mhm.
so the first initial people look at what you're doing and they usually don't like it.
Right.
But
Right.
so that if the people learn that lesson, it's like, well, trying to being liked, all the likes you see on the net isn't part of that game.
Right. Yeah, that's a really great point. Really great point.
But, so though some of the points in the book we haven't gotten to, but maybe you think
Mhm.
are lessons learned or really key points you wanna bring out. You don't wanna give away the whole book, but maybe something that you think is important that we haven't tapped into.
Yeah, I mean, one statistic I'll throw out there is on grayscale. So, grayscale is the setting where you can turn your phone into black and white. And our phones, we were talking about how the alerts and the red notification badges are so enticing. And a study showed that if you put your phone on grayscale, it reduces people's phone use by 50 minutes a day.
Ooh,
So I thought that was really interesting. And so, going back to our topic of best practices, putting your phone in grayscale as much as possible is really useful. And on phones, you can create shortcuts so you don't have to go into settings every time. So with my phone,
yeah.
I triple click the side button and it'll go from grayscale to regular because sometimes, I might want to see a photo in color, but I try to keep the default to grayscale. So that's
Oh,
another
cool.
little hack that a lot of people don't know about, yeah.
So
And
you got a
sometimes
lot
people
of
have seen grayscale, but they don't really know why.
don't know what
So
it
that's
is.
why, yeah, it just makes the phone less fun. If I'm responding to an email or something, it's just kind of fun when it's in color, but when it's in grayscale and I need to look up how far away a store is or something, I'm like, oh God, this is so boring. Like, let me get off of this as soon as possible. I really see for me a difference in the experience when my phone is in black and white.
That's a cool hack.
So
And so your book,
yeah.
you have a lot of these hacks kinda embedded in the book?
Yeah, I use research backed strategies, stories from my life and from those of my clients, um, some psych frameworks of how we can think about things, a little similar to how we were talking about how you can't always be perfect. I use other techniques to frame your progress. And then I just in near the end of the book, I explore some of my own personal interests, like dopamine or the attention economy or how our phone use makes us less tolerant of others. That's a little bit more just what I'm interested in, and then readers can
That's
take
cool.
what they want. Yeah.
That's interesting because I do find that, like, out there in the manosphere and kind of, some of the stuff that's out there, um, that as a podcaster, like, if I'm not in that manosphere zone, I don't get the numbers that
Mm,
they'll get
right.
because the
Yeah.
algorithm tends to like things that are edgy, controversial, and
Hmm.
maybe are, very aggressive
Hmm.
or they're not. To me, it's like it's maybe if you're more, willing to, be expansive or tolerant or aspirational, it's like, no, that's like, I don't wanna deal with that. I want somebody who's
Hmm.
like a comedian that's edgy,
Hmm.
that's willing to so it's kinda tilted toward that way, and I'm like, "Well, why does it have to be like that? Like, why can't you have a discussion about vulnerability, a discussion about things that are softer things?" And
Hmm.
maybe that's not sexy or that's not gonna get people going, but it's like, it's important. And so it's like
Right.
sometimes people have to start to understand, like, why are we so gravitating toward things that are like a meanness, you know,
Hmm.
in the world instead of like, is it cool to be mean to your neighbor? Is it better that maybe it's more positive if you're not mean to your neighbor and maybe you won't have an incident if you're
Hmm.
not mean? We've got a lot of incidents happen because of this kind of, people being affected by a sociological term like anomie,
Hmm.
disassociation, disconnection,
Hmm.
or people being not willing to understand other people.
Hmm.
So I think like anything that allows people to understand themselves first, like what
Hmm.
you're doing, is like kind of a looking glass self thing.
Yeah.
Figure out what you're doing, then it's like, oh, maybe other people are doing this, and then having an understanding that once you solve it within yourself, then you can talk about it with other people. But if you haven't solved it, it's hard to talk with anybody else.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we have to look inward. Can't remember what it was for, but it just cracked me up because my husband, he tends to look inwards a little bit more than the average person. I think I'm always like Googling things or whatever, but there was this time that he was filling out some sort of questionnaire, and the questionnaire asked him, like, where do you find your answers, or like, where do you go for solutions? And his response was inwards or Google, which I found hilarious. But a lot of us, we don't check inwards first. We just go straight to the internet,
Mhm.
and we don't always need it, because it's not always just a fact that we're looking for. We might actually be looking for reassurance, and that's why we're going to Google, or we might be looking for acknowledgement, and that's why we're checking our Instagram. So thinking about why am I reaching for my phone, and then thinking about, is there something else that could feed
Yeah,
that need? If it's connection, can I have a conversation with someone in my household instead?
yeah.
And maybe that would actually give me more connection than just scrolling random people I haven't talked to for 5 years. Um,
Like a
so yeah, this
telephone call with
conversation.
telephone call
Yeah,
with your
telephone
best
call.
friend for, like, 2
Exactly.
hours talking to your best friend,
Mhm, mhm.
going over to somebody, knocking on the door of a best friend to find out if they're okay, right?
Mhm.
Going outside of yourself, and then in that
Right.
conversation, you discover yourself. That's, I think, the essence of human communication
Mhm,
is, like,
mhm,
I think we've been because of the pandemic, like you said at the beginning, we got kind of put into using the tech, but now
mhm.
you could actually go knock on your neighbor's door and, talk to 'em. Or
Right,
talk to your
right.
brother, talk to your aunt, talk to your uncle, talk to your best friend. Actually have a human conversation, go out and have coffee, go
Mhm,
out and actually, be together in an event. Like,
mhm,
bowling was a big
mhm.
thing when I was growing up. People go to a
Yeah, I
bowling
love
alley
bowling. Yeah.
and, people go and, go roller skating in a roller rink. That's
Mhm,
a '70s thing.
Mhm,
and you can't
mhm.
really be on your phone in a skating
No,
rink,
no, you can't. Yeah.
you know? So to do something in a group that brings communication together,
Mhm.
and then I think that solves a lot of the problems because you won't be on your phone when you're doing that.
Right, right. And then I think just remembering that we as humans are drawn to what is easy. So it is easier to pick up my phone and scroll Instagram than call up a few of my friends, organize bowling, find a bowling alley that's available, make sure everyone can go there at the same time and then do it. So I think, giving ourselves a little bit of grace for the fact that it is almost always easier to pick up the phone, but then to think about how can I make these other things more accessible? Maybe it means you say, okay, every first Friday of the month, we're going to go bowling because now you've gotten rid of having to figure out the schedule and who's going.
Mhm.
So think about what do you want to put into your life and how do I make it more accessible? Um,
Yeah.
Instead of beating ourselves up on, oh, I should be doing these things more. There's a reason we're not. It's because the phone is easy, but
Yeah,
easy
the
isn't
phone is the
always
easiest
good.
thing there. It gets immediate connection, but then
Yeah.
it has the downsides we've been talking about in terms of using up, uh, all your capacity, and
Hmm.
then you don't
Hmm.
have anything left,
Exactly.
so people, maybe if they don't know that, like, if
Right.
you when you inform people who watch this show and they're like, "Wow, I just used up my reserve," right?
Hmm.
So now I don't have anything left. So it's like, "Oh,
Hmm.
I didn't know that was happening."
Right.
And so it's
Right.
like that's like a eye open that's why we have these podcasts that people
Yeah.
learn something and then
Hmm.
realize, "Oh, I didn't know. Maybe now I
It
can
was
react
finite. Yeah.
a different way," so I think
Totally. Totally.
that's what's super important. So people go
Yeah.
to howtostopscrolling.com, that's how they can get your book. Is they or do you have connect you can connect with people there too?
Yeah, yeah. So if you were interested in what I do, my website howtostopscrolling.com, you can enter your email address and I will send you a free 5-day series with lessons from my book. And
Mm.
my book will be coming out this fall
Oh,
and you'll
awesome.
get notified of that as well. Yeah. So you'll be on my list if you go to howtostopscrolling.com.
So do you have other books you're in the now that you started to write, do you have another book in you that you're working on?
I'm not working on any yet, but I do have some ideas. I think a really natural next step would be something that focuses on this for families or parents. I just, I think it's an interesting challenge because stopping scrolling or reducing your scrolling is already pretty interesting and challenging with individuals because each person is different. Each person's needs, triggers, behaviors are different. Then when you make it a family, you have
It's a
the
whole nother
ages of the
dynamic.
kids, all
Yeah,
the number, so I find that to be an interesting challenge to tackle. So that's something I'm interested in. And I also think having a fulfilling career while being a mother is a separate topic that I'm interested in.
okay, so you
Because
got a lot of ideas that you could still
yeah,
out there. Do
yeah,
you think
definitely.
are you gonna tour with this book once it gets out?
Um, it's a great question. I think I will mostly podcast tour once it's out because I think that'll be a lot more efficient, but stay tuned. We'll see. Yeah.
That's cool. And the other question, will you do an audiobook?
Yes, I will do an audiobook. Yes.
Are you gonna do the narration yourself or hire somebody?
I am actually having a meeting about that this week to decide. Yeah. So that is something we're trying to decide. The two remaining questions are if it should be me or someone else, and if we should have it ready when the book itself launches, which I'm leaning towards because if someone's interested in the book but they don't want to read it, I'd like to give them the audio as an option.
That's cool. Well,
Yeah.
I love talking to you today, and we love to have you back on if you when you have other books or when your book's out, or if you wanna have another take at it or, like, release show just to kinda hit the world with it, or when you have another book, let us know. Um, I'm glad to have you on the show again, and thank you for being on the Family Electric Coach podcast. We've been live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and we will be on all the podcast channels that you can watch or listen to a podcast by tomorrow. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Phantom.
Thank you.